Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of AI Chronicles. Today, I'm really excited because we are diving into a topic that's both close to my heart and super relevant right now, which is developer relations and the evolving role of AI in building communities. For a little context, I used to be a data scientist, so I'm used to working a bit more behind the scenes. Developer relations, I'll tell you, is a whole different game. And when you throw AI into the mix, it just changes everything suddenly. And it's not just about the tech, but how we connect people to it. My guest today, Sam Julien, is the Director of Developer Relations at Writer.com. And if you haven't heard, Writer just raised a Series C. So they're making big moves in the AI space right now. And Sam's been doing incredible work to bridge the gap between developers and AI tools, and we are going to dive into what it really takes to build community trust in this today's fast-paced AI landscape. Sam, welcome to the show. How's everything going?
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Could you maybe give like a quick introduction to the audience?
Yeah. So I'm Sam Julien. I'm the Director of Developer Relations for Writer. We're a enterprise generative AI company building a full stack platform, including models, graph-based RAG, and developer tools. I have been with Writer since April of this year. Before that, I was with Auth0 and Okta, leading developer relations over there. I've been in tech for about 10 years, and about 6 of those years have been doing developer relations from being an IC to being a manager to being a director. So, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so a dense developer relations experience, I must say.
Yeah.
With AI now a central focus, how do you think the role of developer relations shifted?
It's been evolving quite a lot over the last few years, partially because of changes in the global economy, and then partially because of
Mm,
AI and everything that's been happening there. So there's a few different things. I think one thing is that DevRel teams, I think, are a lot leaner than they were a few years ago. They're smaller. It still takes several people in an organization depending on your product and your vertical and your regional strategy and all of that. But um, definitely smaller teams than what we were seeing in like 2019 and 2020 and that kind of thing. And I think that's partially because the budgets are smaller after like the interest rates went up and everything like that. And then also because I think AI is shifting some of the needs there because it takes less time to do things
mm,
like create content and write code and do those kinds of things. So I think that's
right.
one major impact.
Mm, got it. And do you think like are there new skills or mindsets that DevRel professionals need to adapt to support this AI-driven, say, product ecosystems effectively?
Yeah, I think there are several different things that you need to do. I mean, one thing that I'm noticing is there's you know developer relations sort of bounces between a product focused role and a marketing focused role, and I think that is getting like that split is getting deeper.
Mm,
It's depending on the stage of the company and that kind of thing. So early stage companies seem like they have more of a need for DevRel on the product side, doing like developer experience and product feedback and that kind of thing as they're like building a product and
mhm,
building an audience. And then as we get later stage, you have more of a need for like developer marketing and building awareness and that kind of thing. So that will impact which skills you kind of need to focus on more. And I think part of DevRel is just being flexible and adaptable and kind of like going with whatever the company needs
mm,
on that.
mhm,
Um, I also think dev advocates need to be a lot embrace how rapidly everything's changing with AI and really try to stay on top of like how it can make your life easier as a developer relations person, as a dev advocate. It can be used really handily for doing things like creating the first drafts of blog articles or creating like the starting point for code and that kind of thing. It's really like elevated what we can do, and things that used to take weeks can now take days.
Mm-hmm. So I totally resonate with what you're saying, and like when I joined my company, Explain, I'm the first DevRel along with another my colleague that was we were hired together. So the product and the product DevRel part and the marketing, the developer marketing, it's I feel like there's a very thin line between if we want to differentiate, right? And do you think that it's very essential for a developer advocate or anyone developer relations to not exactly sound like a marketing person, but also like, be very developer, but still trying to do that marketing part? Do you think we have to be very aware and be careful of that?
Yeah, definitely. I think what you are trying to accomplish depends on what the business needs. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to raise more awareness, then you're sort of leaning more into some of the marketing activities like
Mm-hmm.
events and top of funnel content and that kind of thing. But even in those scenarios, developers don't like to be sold to.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
don't like hand wavy,
Mm-hmm.
like kind of like businessy jargon kind of thing. They like
Yeah,
to really have a practical, like, what problem is this going to solve?
exactly.
How can I how can this make me better at my job? Like those kinds of
Okay.
things. So
Mm-hmm.
I always like to say that like good developer marketing is really sort of like just becoming friends with the developers. Like you're just trying to like be helpful, provide resources, be reliable, that kind of thing. Like that's how you kind of build trust and loyalty with developers, less so than like um, being more like a salesy and that kind of thing.
Got it. And so, like, how do you decide from when to go from top of the funnel to middle to the bottom? Like, how do you make that transition? Is it more like when this business starts growing, the awareness is increasing? Is that how you go through that transition as well?
Yeah, there's a couple of different factors. So like the size and stage of the company makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
But then also the big differentiating factor is like whether the product is being sold more through like an enterprise like managed sale kind of scenario versus whether there's like a self-service credit
Mm-hmm.
card like the way you can think of it is like are developers the paying customers, like are
Mm-hmm.
developers the ones that are like putting their credit card into the application? Like if so, then there's a lot more marketing that you need because you're trying to actually like drive them to like go through the funnel and actually like become paying customers. Whereas like if it's more of a like an enterprise sales motion, like usually the individual developers aren't the ones who are like making those purchasing decisions. And
Okay.
so in that scenario, you're doing a lot more like middle and bottom of the funnel. Like you'll still do some top of funnel marketing because you want like the cred of like being in the community and like having people be aware so that like if a customer has developers, you want them to know about you. Like ultimately what you want is like the CTO or director of engineering who's going to implement some product. Like they're ideally they go to the teams of developers and are like, hey, have you ever heard of this software? And you want them to be like, oh yeah, like I've seen them at events. They seem like really good people, and the product looks cool. Like that's what you want because you want that like reinforcement of like an enterprise deal. So that's a big part of it. It's been interesting because like there's sort of this arc of like if you're an early stage company, you focus a lot on like developer experience and enablement and that kind of thing. And then you sort of get to this middle stage where you're focused a lot on awareness. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where I joined Auth0 was like in Series C of Auth0. And so like the big push we were trying to make was like we want everybody in the world to know about who we are and what we're doing.
Right.
But then
Right.
as we got bigger and we got acquired and like then we sort of got to this tipping point where like everybody knew who we were. So then it became more focused on like middle of funnel and like
Mm-hmm.
engaging with like keeping developers engaged with us and that kind of thing. So you kind of like go through that full life cycle.
Right. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, so shifting gears from the content to community, and and I think that AI can be, polarizing in the developer community with excitement on one side and skepticism on the other. Now,
Mhm.
how do you balance these perspectives when building and supporting a developer community for an AI focused product?
I think it's important to be realistic and point to real examples of like ROI and practical use cases and that kind of thing. Like
Mm.
I don't think you should make overhyped promises of your AI tool like changing humanity. I mean, other than sort of like the vision of the company, or
Right.
those are always going to be like big lofty goals. But like when you're talking to an average developer,
Yeah.
they are going to know if you're like not telling the truth,
Yeah.
so I try to focus really heavily on like here are practical scenarios that this comes in handy. Is honestly one
Hmm.
of the things that like drew me to writer was that it was very focused on like delivering real value to customers at scale, like and a lot of it isn't like super flashy. It's like
Mm.
this company used writer to like generate product descriptions in multiple languages, and it saved them like thousands of hours of time, which translated into millions of dollars. Like so
Yeah.
it's not like some mind-blowing application. It's like it works and it is actually saving time and money at scale. So and I think developers inherently like those are the things that impress them. I mean, there's flashier things you can do, obviously, and those
Sure.
things are cool. We all love a good demo, but like
Mm.
when it comes down to like getting your job done, like like the demos are cool, but also like you need to know that it's actually working and reliable and that kind of thing.
Got it. Got it. So when it comes to like claiming things, not like in the level of changing humanity per se, but more like realistic claims. But they still, it may sound a little far fetched. So, what I'm getting at is taking that and the idea of taking a risk, especially if you are a small startup or trying to fundraise or whatever, and as a DevRel or a team of DevRel and other marketing people involved, how do you balance that? The hype or the claim, realistic kind of claims versus the risk.
I think, well, from like the perspective of a developer, I feel like
Hmm.
you have to back that up with
Proof.
code and proof.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I think not I think the business user side you can get away with more kind of promising and
Hmm.
like delivering later, or like living up to a promise or something, whereas I feel like with developers, as soon as you make a claim you've got to be able to prove it, or you've got to be transparent about like when it's actually going to be
Yeah.
provable. Like
Hmm.
I feel like I have that conversation a lot with marketing people of like the developer community is reasonable and will accept things, but you have to be authentic about it. Like
Yeah.
it's way better to be like, hey, this feature is in beta, it's not done
Hmm.
yet, it's going to be done soon, but here's a demo of like how it's working now. Like
Exactly.
developers
Yeah.
would much rather have that than have you be like, this thing is amazing, and then when they go to the docs to try to find it, it's like, oh, it's actually like not going to be released for a year from
Yeah.
now, and like all of
Yeah.
that. Like developers just want you to be straightforward with them, even if things are a work in progress, that's great. Just like tell them that
Yeah.
it's a work in progress.
So, so you're saying that transparency would be more accepted than, I guess, false claims. Is that how I
Yeah,
should read it?
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. Great. Agreed. Now, working with AI products can, of course, add the complexity for both developers and just everybody involved. So, what unique challenges do you face in either you can talk about your experience as a DevRel at Writer or at any other of your companies, and how do you approach those challenges?
Right now, I think the biggest challenge is just the speed at which everything is moving.
Mm.
I feel like I'm sort of like speed running the first 6 years of my DevRel career in like 6 months,
Oh my
um,
God. Wow.
because it's such a competitive landscape and
Mm-hmm.
things, people are going from research to production super fast, trying to like push the envelope as much as possible and then turn that into a product as fast as possible, and so we're staying on top of like model launches and feature launches and all of that. And you just like have to move quickly. And so the pace at which I was sort of accustomed to doing
Mm-hmm.
DevRel has like really changed a lot. And it definitely took me a couple of months to like
Get in
adapt
the
to that and like
rhythm.
get the
Yeah.
hang of it.
I bet. I bet. Yeah. Been 2 months working as a DevRel. This is my first DevRel job. As I
Oh,
mentioned earlier, was a data scientist in the past. Now, I enjoy the whole world of developer relations and finally working as a DevRel. Oh my gosh, I totally resonate with that speed challenge that you mentioned. It's like every day I wake up, there is something new. And then I have to think about, do I switch my blog to something that resonates with the new version of an LLM or try something else? It's like, okay, how are we supposed to keep up? Uh,
yeah,
but you got to
yeah.
do what you got to do.
Yeah, for sure. I also think the other challenge I found is just the specific to doing DevRel in AI is just the added layer of complexity that the LLM provides
Mm,
it makes it first of all it adds this layer of complexity just to the product development because you have this new layer of like where things can possibly go wrong. So there's a lot
mhm,
more like bugs to fix. And like we just spent the last several months doing implementing tool calling in our latest model and that kind of thing. And that was like such a fascinating process to be part of because
mhm,
like I was really involved with more of the like API spec management and docs and guides and like things like that, like the developer experience around tool calling. And just like being part of that process and seeing how like is this a bug in the model? Is it a bug at the API layer? Is it a bug like and then translating that into like developer experience of like, okay, when a developer goes to use this, how do we make sure we've like smoothed out all the rough
right.
edges and
Mhm,
all of that. So that's really cool because coming from a more traditional software company, we didn't have that, and it's really cool, but it's also adds this like level of chaos of
yeah.
like, oh man, like this, the models are not deterministic, and you just have to like try to wrangle them as best you
Yeah.
can, and it makes like doing demos and stuff is always it's
Oh,
like hopefully it works,
it's like it hopefully
like
it works.
it's
That's like
it's
the chant. That's the mantra that you have to keep chanting right before you give the
yeah,
demo. I totally get it.
yeah.
Um, so that actually it's a good segue to that brings me to the next question is like for developers that are who are trying to thrive in this, as you mentioned, like this speed, the rapidly changing AI landscape, what like strategies or resources would you recommend? And, just this is something I ask many of my guests, like how do you stay updated and continue to innovate as AI tools continue to evolve?
Yeah, my go-to resources these days are the Latent Space podcast and AI news newsletter that Sean Wang runs. Like those are
Mhm.
sort of my go-to. There's also a zillion Discord servers
Oh my God.
for AI. Like every company has a Discord server, and so like those are a lot. The AI newsletter is very handy because it summarizes all of the stuff for the day, and you can kind of just
Mm-hmm.
like scan through it. Um, I do feel like it's there. It's hard to have like perspective right now because everything is happening so rapidly and everything you're like right in the middle. So I don't know if there's a lot of good resources yet on like taking like a step back and like looking. I feel like there's so much that you have to do on like a more of a quarterly basis of like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
what actually happened over the last few months and like what is important. And because there's just a lot of noise right now, and so it's hard to kind of deduce that. But so there's a lot of resources on keeping up with like the day-to-day stuff. But I also feel like if you're not working in AI, you don't really need to keep up with every single thing
I
that's
guess.
happening. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like you kind of can wait a month or two and like let the dust settle on things and then like incorporate what is like actually working in your with your development flow and that kind of thing. I don't
Right.
know. What do you think? What do you
You
do?
know, yeah, so it's a mix of different things. So social media has been my best friend, so to keep up. But
Hmm.
then, like, especially if you follow like some of the very popular either DevRels or just people in AI who write or share things on LinkedIn and Twitter, that those are my go-to, I would say.
Hmm.
And the other, it's like the events. I think events have been like one of the most successful way for me to keep up because so besides just hosting the events in San Francisco, I also like to attend the other events from other communities. Like there's MLOps community, then there's Gen AI Collective, and oh my God, so many more communities.
Hmm.
So it's pretty cool. So like, you go to any event and in SF, you are like at in the heart of the innovation.
Yeah.
So like if you choose a time, you step out of the house and you say, okay, let's go to Microsoft Reactor's office, you'll find some AI tech event. You might as well just go in. Or you go to
Yeah.
AWS Cloud. It's like so many events happening in parallel and they are all very beneficial. Um, so yeah, so those are like some of my go-to ways to just stay up to date and just, attending some webinars or just hanging out and networking at these events. I think so far has been working like a charm. I'd still say it's still not enough, but I think I've made my peace with it's never going to be enough. So I think, these
Yeah.
work to an
Yeah.
extent. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the future of AI and how you see the developer roles. Like, so with AI automating many aspects of software development, what do you see as the future role of developers? Or if I have to maybe rephrase that question, how can DevRel help developers stay relevant and even excel in this a fast-paced AI world?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a stretch of time where developers are really going to be needed for like overseeing and orchestrating lots of different AI development tools and agents and things like that. Like I think um you know we're we're at a point where AI is getting increasingly good at generating code, and I think that means like there's not going to be less of a need for people who know what they're doing. I think there's going to be more of a need for that. Like I do think like eventually, like I think there's some arc in which uh, developers and AI engineers will end up getting eliminated someday, like, but I think we have a long stretch of time. I mean, I don't know what that translates to, long stretch of time these days, but I feel like we're entering this phase, or we've been entering this phase over the last few months or so of like the you're seeing more and more products like with v0.dev and bolt.new and devon and like all of these things that are like kind of more autonomous coding agents and that kind of thing. And like you're going to need the developers who are going to be kind of more of like an architect role, who can like make sure the code is working and tell the AI agent, coding agent, like what to do, and like put all these pieces together. Like you know so I think we'll see less developers writing sort of boilerplate code and simple demos and like simple features, and more overseeing those like increasingly sophisticated coding agents as we get better and better on this.
That's an interesting take. Okay. Yeah,
What
I
do you
I
think?
mean with the coding thing, I do see that as you mentioned, like the boilerplate code that might reduce over the time. Um, I think people with the basic software development, maybe they just need to up their levels to keep
Hmm.
up with AI, so that well, I guess the job stays relevant, because I feel that we are going to continue needing the software engineers and developers. It's just skills will need like a major evolution, in my opinion.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
how I see it.
Yeah, I agree because like I think about just my own use of I'm not really using any like agents
Hmm.
for coding, but I mean I use a lot of LLMs for writing code, or like I use Cursor a lot and that kind of thing. And like for me, as someone who's been writing code for like 10 years, it's super useful because I know the questions to ask it. Like I
Hmm.
can recognize, I can ask it to do something, and if I can tell I have like either knowledge or experience or a gut instinct of like this isn't quite right. Like, can you make this more efficient? Can you make this more eloquent? Can you like like I know how to kind of converse with it to get the code to a better state. Whereas
Right.
like I feel like when I was a junior, like when I was first getting started, I wouldn't know, and so I'd just be sort of like copy pasting and like hoping that things work and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of going to be that's sort of dangerous. And so I mean, hopefully over time, like the code generation will continue to get better and better. But I still think you're going to need some human in the loop of like
Yes.
at the very least you're going to need to know how to prompt it the best
Mm.
way to get the
Yeah.
right output that you want, and like
Yeah.
tell it which best practices or like patterns you want to follow or like architecture that you want to follow, that
Hmm.
kind of thing. Like it won't just intuitively know everything that you actually need it to do. And so I agree. I think there's still like a huge need for developers to like get better at
Yeah.
being at coding and like understanding how to like like create software and get better at like architecture patterns and design patterns and like all of that. I think that will stay relevant for a
Yeah.
while.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agreed with you. Yeah. I think, yeah, that human in the loop component, I feel that is what some people just forget and think and get sucked up in all these controversies that, AI is taking their job, but they forget that they're still needed to an extent. It's just they need to like, they need to up their level of their skills.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, last question. And this is something more around what advice you would give for people who want to get into DevRel roles, specifically within AI driven companies. And I ask this question because I get asked a lot, like from some of my friends, some of the people I meet who want to make that transition, just like how I did, going from data scientist to becoming a DevRel or software developer going to DevRel and things like that. So, what are some of the key skills and qualities that you think the DevRel aspirants should cultivate to succeed in this new role?
Yeah, I think I a few years ago I wrote a book called Getting Started in Developer Relations, and I think that like mostly still holds true. And there were a few key components of that book. I think one of the key sort of elements of developer relations is just empathy. Like you're trying to learn what the user is feeling and uh, anticipate what kind of questions they're going to have and that kind of thing. And so really trying to like cultivate that mindset as you're approaching a product.
Right.
That's a little like philosophical, but as far as like key skills, I still think like I wrote one of the chapters in there, and I think it's a blog post online too. Is like you don't have to wait to start doing developer relations until you actually have a job doing it. Like you
Mm-hmm.
can basically you know pick a tool and that you really like and
Mm-hmm.
figure out like the pain points, the wins, the friction that you're seeing, create some content around it, like build conference talks around it. Like you can totally
Yeah.
do all of that stuff on your own
Yeah.
to like first of all see if you actually like it.
Yeah.
Like sometimes it
Exactly.
seems good in theory and then you don't actually
Yes.
want to do it.
Yep.
And then you can also like use that to build kind of like a portfolio of your like writing and speaking and like demo applications and those kinds of things. So I think that's a big part of it. And I think if you're specifically wanting to get into AI, like you're going to have to really get to know the ecosystem and uh, figure out like which area you would want to specialize in. Is
Mm-hmm.
it more of like the model providers or is it more of like the ML ops kind of side of things, or is it more of like the software product kind of side? Like,
Mm,
it's becoming such a big landscape that you can't know everything all the time, you know. So
right.
um, really get good at learning about those things and creating content and helpful resources and that kind of thing. Um, it's unfortunate that like right now I feel like a lot of DevRel opportunities in AI are in San Francisco exclusively. I got extremely lucky to get this job, and it's pretty rare like for it to not be in the Bay Area, and I think that's unfortunate because I think that there's a lot of DevRel talent around the world, and
I
there's
bet.
also
Hmm.
a real need to like
Yes.
broaden the reach of these AI companies, and also
Yes.
like have better representation around the world of like different types of people and all of that. So I hope we get over that
Hmm.
before too long. It's weird because I feel like I'm sort of watching the AI world make all the same mistakes in DevRel that the web development world did like 5 years ago. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's a little
Yeah.
because I'm like, "Ah, we gotta like get over some of these things and like learn those
Yes.
lessons."
I,
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
I think it was so. I don't think many companies fully understand what DevRel is. That is what
Oh
I
yeah, that's
feel.
definitely true.
Because a year ago, when I decided to make this transition, I connected with several DevRels around the world from different vector database companies and whatnot, and everyone had like similar bases. But when I started interviewing, and I'm like, okay, I don't think it's very clear what people are looking for when they say DevRel, or they know what a DevRel really does. So there's like that whole learning curve. And it was similar, like what you mentioned about web development. It's similar to what I saw when I was working as a data scientist. There was a whole another level of confusion as to, is develop data scientist a software engineer, or it's two different things, or is it just statistician. So it's like, yeah, I think the tech world goes through this cycle every so often, every time a new job title comes up and becomes like big and required, I guess. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
thank
totally.
you.
I think there's also the problem that like uh if you're not clear on what you want developer relations to do, you also try to have them do everything. So I see a lot of
Yes.
job postings that are like for the first developer relations person at a AI startup in San Francisco, and like the job description is this like laundry list of like 85 different things.
Yes.
And it's just like not humanly possible for to
Mm-mm.
find one person who can
Doing
simultaneously
everything.
like do your blog and your Twitch streams and your SDKs and your docs and your like that's
Uh,
just like not realistic, and you're gonna burn
no.
people out, and it's
Yeah.
just not how it works. Like I'm trying to be that like I feel like one of the core lessons we learned in the web development world of developer relations is that like there's really a minimum viable DevRel organization of like 3 to 4 people. Like even in this world of lower economy and AI and everything, like you inherently need like one person who can be dedicated to content, and one person who can be dedicated to community building, and one person that can be dedicated to like events and things like that. Like
Yeah.
that's just there's going to be crossover, but like
Yeah.
I kind of firmly believe like those key functions of sort of like developer experience, community, and outreach, like awareness, are like that's like 3 people right there. Like, and
Yeah.
they'll all kind of mix and match in what they do, but
Yes.
um, those are like 3 very necessary functions that need to be covered
Hmm.
by employees. So I just feel like over the next year we're going to see uh, a lot of these DevRel people like burning out in AI and leaving, and trying to find other jobs and things like that. And so I'm trying to do my best to head that off for
Fingers
people and,
crossed.
and, and give them these lessons ahead of time. But
Yes. Totally
hopefully,
agreed.
hopefully things will evolve.
Yep. Yep. I am with you on that. But hey, Sam, this was an excellent conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and knowledge about developer relations and AI in general. I really enjoyed talking with you today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And yeah, feel free to reach out anytime if you've got questions or if there's anything I could do to help, and can share some links of some other resources I've got and that kind of thing.
Perfect. Thank you.